Hi, welcome everybody. It's Chris Petri. Thanks so much for coming by. We're doing a beautiful, this is more like a seascape style painting, but we do have a beautiful structure. We have a bridge here on this scene, distant mountains, distant horizon lines with the ocean water, some really beautiful details, some beautiful washes. This is actually the glazing technique. So you're going to really learn all about the glazing technique here. As well, we're going to cover the pencil sketch, how to create your pencil sketch first, kind of lay out where everything's going to go on your paper. We take our time to do that, and this way you really can get a good feel for starting out your painting correctly. We're not being in too much of a rushed mood to start, but actually starting out slow, methodically, and covering all the bases that you have to kind of get everything set in the correct positioning for your painting to come out looking really pleasant and pleasing. So for getting that effect you want in your paintings, we're going to cover how you're going to actually lay out this painting. We're going to measure. We're going to use some rulers. You don't necessarily have to do a lot of measuring in this, but you'll kind of see how we lay things out with hash marks around our painting and all of that good stuff. So, and then after that, we're going to show you how to get these beautiful washes on. With the glazing technique, we go step by step through the painting so you see how that glazing technique works with a wonderful painting like this, which is really kind of like a perfect glazing technique style painting where there's lots of gorgeous wet washes all over the paper and water and sky and clouds. So you're going to see this is just a wonderful painting to do. I'm glad you're stopping by, and if you're here for the first time, it is an extreme beginner series here, so we're doing paintings that are going to kind of appeal to people that are just starting out. So if you're just starting out in watercolor and maybe this is your first time even coming to this channel, I welcome you and thank you for coming by. And we're going to actually start now with the sketch, and you'll see we're going to go through every detail you need to get this painting done. And once you're completed, you're really going to have a beautiful time, maybe even setting this in a nice frame for yourself, or maybe putting a mat on it and putting it up on the wall, or setting it where you work in your art studio. You can be happy and proud of your paintings as you go, and when a painting comes out really well, celebrate a little bit, put your painting up on the wall, always try to celebrate your victories with watercolor, because watercolor is a difficult medium. Don't let anyone tell you it's easy. It's not. It takes time. You have to practice. Put in your practice time, 15 minutes a day of sketching, drawing, and then, on the weekends maybe you do your painting, where you work maybe 3 hours on your painting. So you kind of balance your sketching and painting at the same time. If you have more time, sure, put in as much time as you can, but at least try to get in your 15-20 minutes a day of drawing, even 5 or 10 minutes a day of drawing, pencil drawings and pen drawings, and then you're doing your painting maybe when you have more time on the weekends, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, whatever you can do. Everyone's different, but again, I thank you for coming by, and we're going to just get started in a second, okay? Okay, so we're just getting started again here, and we saw the finished painting for the first minutes of the video here, and so we're going to kind of work through the process here of when we look at a composition. We're just going to remember kind of to maybe think about it, meditate on it a little bit first. I know it's kind of sometimes difficult to do if we're busy with things in life and so forth, and we're trying to kind of get our practice time in with our watercolors. But for something like this is more of like, let's say, a finished painting where you have a little more time. Maybe you have like an afternoon or a morning or an evening block of time, maybe 3-4 hours, something like that, where you can get a little more into taking your time and just sort of slowing things down a bit. I get caught up myself, and a lot of times I go quick with things with my art, sometimes with practicing or getting things done. That's understandable. We all do this type of thing where we try to kind of rush through things a little bit. But for this type of painting, let's kind of just slow it down, and I'm going to try to do this more as a conscious effort on my videos, kind of just, break things down a little more, instead of just, going right in, full force from the start. So first I'll take a sketch paper like this, just printer paper, and I'll just set it down here on the table that we're working on here. Underneath it I have watercolor paper already set up with some tape, artist tape, It's actually Pro is the name. The brand name is Pro, P-R-O, and it's called drafting tape. Pro drafting tape works great. It's it's got that nice manila tan look to it, which is nice. It's a little bit off, a little dark, a little bit off white, which is changes the color of it from the paper, so you get a little bit of a border, but it's not too distracting, where some of the other tapes sometimes can be kind of distracting, colored tapes and stuff like that. I tend to really like the drafting tape. But so that's all set up and ready to go. And then on this, I took my watercolor pad of paper and I split it in half. So I take a piece of printer paper and I tape it down underneath the border with the drafting tape. So I cover one half of my pad of paper with printer paper so that I can save that for the next painting. And then I have this section here, which is the top section of the watercolor pad, and we have that. That's just a thing I do. I'll buy a larger pad. This is like a 7 by 14, I think, pad of paper. Let me see if this is, let's see. This is 11 by 17. It might be 11 by 17. I got to measure this stuff. I forget. I buy different types of pads of watercolor. Like I try to get bargains when they're on sale and things like that online, so I don't have one set paper I use all the time. So I'm just going to try to measure this up so I can give you what the pad is. It's 15 by 11 by 15 basically. Yep, 11 by 15, or 11 by 14, I'm sorry. 11 by 14 is the pad size. And I found this new watercolor paper, works really good. It's beautiful actually. It's like a student grade paper. It's probably it could be either student or professional grade. It's priced really, really nicely. So I use this often. I've been getting some bargains online. It's called Arteza. I'm trying to see. I think it's spelled A-R-T-E-Z-A. I think I bought it on Amazon. So that's the paper we'll be using when we do this painting. So here we put the printer paper down with a little bit of tape. And I always kind of harp on this. You kind of know me by now. I'm always saying, like, try to tape your anything you're working on, tape it down so it's secure and it's not moving around or sliding around. That can really throw off your drawing or your painting and so forth. So I always have everything really secured to the work table. So that's just a thing I kind of always do. So the painting we're going to do, you just saw the finished painting, but we're going to do first, before we do it, let's say you're looking at a photograph online, or you're working from an art book you have. Maybe you purchased an art book, or you're seeing a photograph online and you want to recreate it. You can simply sketch it one time first and kind of work out a game plan of how you're going to do it. So on this painting, I think our best game plan is going to be, we're going to create the, first we'll create the shoreline, the distant shoreline. And that's about a little bit higher than halfway. So if we had a ruler, let's say, rulers are great to have. You can use these, they're fantastic. You can kind of measure stuff and scale stuff a little better. And so, like, let's say this is 13 centimeters. So this is 13 centimeters. Halfway would be 6.5. So 6.5 would be half of 13. So that's 6.5 right there. So that's like a halfway point, right? Let's go just a little bit higher than halfway with our distant horizon line. Just a little bit. So let's just remember our distant horizon line in this painting is going to be a little bit above halfway. And I think we can use the halfway point, or a little bit above halfway point in this painting, because it'll work for us. A lot of times it's not going to look so good, so you always hear me say you're always going to want to not put something right on the half point, right on the center point when you're doing like a landscape type painting. But sometimes it does work. It depends on what you're doing. But if you're doing like a painting like we're doing here, and you saw the finished painting, right? So we can do it with about halfway, a little bit above halfway, and it'll work good. And then, all right, so we have that. Just our starting point of where we're going to have our horizon line, distant shoreline, and it gets a little bit closer over here. But now that we have that, now we can kind of say that this is the far distance. So we have maybe a little bit of distant shoreline over here in the distance. And then about here, we're going to start to have a distant mountain range. Very, very, very small as far as the mountains. They're not going to be big mountains you would see out in the west of the United States or in the Alps, the French Alps or something like that. I also, if you're just starting out, and because this is an extreme beginner series, so if you're just starting out, you can get your just above halfway point set, and then you can also make sure your measurement's the same on the page. So if you're over here, you drew your rectangle, you got your halfway point, then you said I'm going a little bit above halfway, and you got that. Then you just want to measure and say, okay, what is that? That's 6 centimeters. Then let's make sure over here we have the same thing, 6 centimeters, approximately. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that's just a good rule of thumb. Keep this line here level, not like this or like this. We want to keep it level. And then that's where you can just take a light pencil line and just go right across with a light pencil line, not dark, just super light. Hopefully you can see that. That's going to be your water line, let's say, your horizon line, your ocean, your bay here. And then we're going to work from that. So we said we're just going to make a very, very, very slight shoreline here. What's with a distant mountain range, very, very light. And you can kind of see how I'm developing that. Then as we get over here, we're going to make it a little bit larger. So the mountain range is just going to get a little larger because it's closer to us. So if you can imagine, this shoreline is kind of turning towards us. So we're kind of looking at a shoreline that is curving this way towards us. So over here on this right side, we're going to pretend that's closer. And then we're going to do that. So we're going to make this mountain area just a little bit larger, a little bit taller, the mountains over here, like that. And that's all you have to do. And that's the first part of our design layout, is getting our shoreline in and how it gets smaller and smaller into the distance. And then over here, we're going to want to leave just water over here. So you're going to have that feeling like you can kind of just float out with a boat out into the distant oceans. And, we don't want to block ourselves in with like all the mountain range and shoreline. So we're going to pretend that this section over here, right on this left side, is just the ocean, nothing there. So that you can feel like you can just float out with your boat, your ship, whatever, and maybe you're on a jet ski or something, and you want to just go right out there and head out to the deeper ocean and go somewhere, other parts of the imagination of this painting. All right, so now we've got our distant shoreline, our distant mountains, and our mountains that are starting to get closer to us over here. And then that's the first part. So that will be what we're going to draw on our watercolor paper under here, this. Then, once we get done with that, we're going to actually do our bridge. We're doing a beautiful, bridge structure here. It's exciting. Bridges are always fun. It's like a bridge is an idea of you're bridging from one thing to another, to one landmass to another. It's kind of, life is like that. Life is like bridges. We go across bridges from one place in life to another, and we kind of just go over and get there and deal with what we have to deal with. And so we're going to go over here and just slowly have this bridge come across and then diminish down over here until it's pretty much right there at the bottom of this mountain range, like that. So this gives us the feeling of it's further away over here and it's getting closer this way. So the bridge is kind of angling towards us this way. That's the kind of feeling we get when we make the bridge higher up over here. So now this is fun because when you do these sketches like this before you start, you kind of learn a little bit about the painting first. So your mind gets prepared, so when you go in and do your sketch and painting, you kind of already have some good information on how you develop the scene and what we're thinking about, and kind of like how all the parts of the painting are working together. So now that we have that, now we're just going to start just sketching in lightly the bridge supports here. Now these bridge supports, they get smaller and closer together as they go into the distance. So that by the time you get over here, there's going to be seemingly a lot of vertical lines like this, because we're closer here. The bridge supports here are larger, and you can see more of the distance between each bridge support or column. You could call them columns, bridge supports. And then again, they get smaller between each distance. They get a little smaller and smaller. You don't have to measure them, but you just want to kind of make sure that you are seeing a diminishing effect of these lines. Another way of doing it is just saying, okay, let me draw a rectangle. It's sort of like a rectangle, and you make it smaller like that. And then you just start out with large squares, and then like a ladder. And then you sort of, maybe like a ladder, and then you just sort of start diminishing the size of the vertical lines, the spacing. So the spacing gets a little tiny bit closer and closer until you have it like that. So that's kind of the same idea. So good, we have practiced and we've got a really good feel for what we're going to draw next. So let's take a break, and then once we take this break, then we'll get started and we'll recreate this same drawing on our watercolor paper so that we have that ready to go. Okay? All right, so we'll be right back. And I always mention, if you like this video so far, please subscribe. It's simple. Subscribing just lets you know I'm making a new video, and it's coming out on a specific day, and you'll get that notification from YouTube. So the button is right down here on the bottom right-hand side. Subscribe, you hit that. There's no obligations for anything. You can always cancel and just, turn the button off anytime you want. But all it is just basically let you know I'm making a new video, and that's really it. So a very simple thing to do. It helps also my channel here. So if you want to help my channel to grow and to get better, and it's a positive thing for me, a helpful thing for me if you do subscribe. It really does help. So anyway, we'll come right back in just a second, and we'll start our pencil drawing on our watercolor paper, and that's all ready to go. We have our tape down, and we're all set now for doing our drawing. Okay, so we're starting back up again. We just took a quick break to relax for a few 5-10 minutes, and then let's get started here. Now we're going to sort of backtrack, and we'll keep that sketch that we did across from us. So I have my sketch that I did across from us, we just did. And we're just going to say again, we're going to sort of we'll use our ruler again, and we'll kind of just say we're going to go 13 is 6.5. That's our center point. And then we're going to go a little bit higher than center. So let's go, maybe we'll go 6, maybe 5.5 centimeters from the top down. So that's going to be our, maybe we'll even go in between there. So just a touch above that center mark. And then we'll just remember to measure over this way. So we're going to use this mark here. And that is 6 centimeters down from the top. And we're going to make that the same going all the way across so we have a good level. And we can spin the ruler around this way too. So we have 6 there, 6 here. And we put our light pencil mark across. And then we have that. And then we're going to, again, work on our distant horizon line and the mountains and mountain ranges in the distance here along the shoreline. And we're just going to kind of get in a nice soft mountain range here. It's going to be very, very light. And it just slowly comes up. There might be another little bit of mountain range there, and then up here this way. And then it just slowly gets larger, but not to the point where it's all the way up here. So you want to definitely make sure, maybe you give yourself, maybe you can give yourself and say, all right, I'm going to make it maybe I'll go with 1.5 centimeters above on this side is where we're going to kind of wind up for the height of our mountain range here. Like this. So we want to kind of keep it like this. We don't want to go way too up here. Up here, that would look kind of unpleasant looking, having just like something in this distant and then this closer shoreline and closer mountain range here. It would kind of just look at a nice slight uphill mountain range going across. And that's that. We have it. That's our mountain range. Then we said we were going to take our bridge that goes across in this picture. We'll kind of notice that the bridge over on this side winds up being about the height of the mountains, the same as over here. So we'll make a mark over here, and you can see, you can kind of see the way when I'm working with sketching and drawing, I'm trying to just, use a little bit of the ruler, to kind of gauge things. You can, some of you might be great with the ruler. You might have to use it for work if you're in any kind of business that might have, where you have to use measuring tools to do things, or you might have experience with, a lot of people have experience with using measurements, rulers, and things like that, or math. If you're good with math, then you'll be able to kind of, if you're not so used, you don't really work a lot with measurements and measuring tools and math and stuff like that. No big deal. It's very simple. You're just using either the standard American, which is inches, or you can use centimeters for like metric, for the metric system. Centimeters seem to be good when I'm working with like smaller paintings. If I'm doing a larger painting, I might use like a tape measure and use a tape measure to measure things with, and I would use the standard in construction. So I'm able to use the tape measure really easily. I'm used to the tape measure for many, many years. And so we have our distant shoreline. We're saying that the top of the bridge is going to be over here on this height, the same as this over here. But it does slope down to this height here, which is about a half a centimeter above the water. So if I look at my centimeter, half a centimeter up from the water line is going to be the bottom of the bridge here, because it gets smaller. It kind of funnels down. So it basically looks like a funnel. The funneling effect, I guess, is the distance. If we're talking about perspective, things get smaller as they go into the distance. So now what you can do is you can use your ruler to get a very, very light, super light line for your bridge, like that. And then I think it, so now you can kind of see it starts down here in the distance and the bridge goes up like this. Now, I would mention this. You're the artist. You have to make your own decisions on things like this, but I think it's good to have this pencil line, this super light pencil line for your bridge, the top of your bridge, just to have a guide so you stay on track. But the painting will look better if you just paint by hand along that line, but you don't keep it so strict. Like, we probably don't want to try to like be hyper critical of this line here and say we have to make that straight, to go to the extreme where you would put some tape down and paint along the tape. I wouldn't do that. I would leave it a little bit of fluctuation and waviness to this line for this bridge is going to look better than maybe trying to do it with a ruler, or put tape down and try to paint along a tape line with your painting. I wouldn't do that. You'll see what I mean as we paint, but this line is just a reference line for us so that we keep on track for our bridge, but we wouldn't want to paint it super straight line like this. We want to have a little bit of fluctuation in that line. So okay, so now we have that. Now we're going to start to look at the supports, and we're just going to start to get a few supports in. And again, I'm going to diminish them as I go. So the first one's spaced, like this. And then, you can, again, if you want to space them I don't think it's so critically important to like start measuring, but if you can, or if you need to, you can also measure this and say, okay, this one's 2.5 centimeters apart, these two supports. So if we go over here and it's 2.5 was this distance between these two supports, 2.5, we might just go a little bit less than 2.5, maybe a couple millimeters shy of that. Then this one here, maybe we go with 2. Maybe we diminish it a couple millimeters as we go. Then here it might be like 1 3/4. And then as we go this way, we can sort of guesstimate now, because they're going to start to get closer and closer, like that. And then there we have it. And then now it's just, we could do random lines like that. But I think this is pretty good. And again, they're going to be, the bridge supports are going to get smaller too in height. So you're going to see how this gets. Maybe this one's like this, and then as they go into the distance, they get shorter. These bridge supports get shorter in size. They start to shrink down in height, like this. So we wouldn't see them protruding below that water line there. And these are just, again, when we paint, you'll just see these are guidelines for us. They're not the actual, we're not going to be so strict that we have to follow every single bit of line that we make. And then here, we can start to then we can make a decision on, maybe we're going to make this straight line here, and then this one's going to taper out just a little bit this way. So we're going to make 2 lines as we get this one in, then we're going to make another one here, and these are going to be like the supports. So there's actually 2 supports that go alongside each other. And then here you won't see that so much, but here you'll see the 2 supports a little more noticeable. 2 separate supports under the, and then we're going to have some railings on the bridge. And we don't have to, and here I'm not being strict. Again, I'm not using the ruler, and we'll do all this with our brush, just to remember we're going to have some supports and then some railings on the bridge. You're really going to have a lot of fun with this. This is really a fun painting to do. It takes a little bit to get your sketch done, but trust me, you'll have a great time. Once this is all, your sketch is done, then it's all free flowing. You'll just put your washes on. We'll make a gorgeous sky wash here, a nice free-flowing sky wash and water. We'll get some water, some ocean here. It's maybe a bay. And you'll see it'll be a lot of fun. Once we're completed, you're going to be really happy with your painting. Okay, so let's take another break, because now we're finished with our sketching, our contour drawing, or sketching, or drawing. You can call it all 3. This is maybe not so much a contour drawing. This is more or less a drawing, a sketch. A drawing or a sketch could work for this, for being really, really accurate with our terminology. Okay, so we'll come right back and start painting. We'll have this is going to be the glazing technique, as we always say. And on my channel, if you've been following me for a while, and if you're brand new here and this is the first time you're at my channel, thanks so much for coming by. I'm so happy that you're here. And, if you've been here a while, maybe a month or 2 or a couple, maybe, a month or more, maybe 6 months to a year, you kind of always see me do 2 styles of painting with watercolors, glazing technique or alla prima technique. You can use the combination of the 2. Best thing to do is to learn both of them separately. Try to work with both of them kind of in a separate type way, like try one painting just alla prima, then try another one just glazing. And we do that here on my channel, so you're going to learn that. But just to kind of like go over again what we do, we either do glazing technique usually, or the alla prima technique, and then we also sometimes combine both of them and kind of, mix the 2 together. But if you learn both kind of in a separate type of way in your mind you kind of solidify what is a glazing technique versus what is a alla prima technique, you'll have a lot more fun with your paintings, because then you'll know how to approach things a little bit better whenever you're creating a painting, no matter what type of painting it is in watercolor. You'll be able to kind of say to yourself, yeah, this one looks like I'm going to need to do the glazing technique. Or you might look at another painting that you're going to do and you say, oh yeah, this is definitely an alla prima type painting. I wouldn't want to do the glazing technique on this one. So that's why I want to always show you both kind of methods all the time and techniques of both. This way you'll eventually, after maybe a year or two of doing both all the time, you'll kind of just automatically you'll start using both together, amalgamating them together, and then you'll kind of have it, and you won't have to really so much. You'll just, by intuition, you'll kind of know which technique you're going to use. Maybe it's going to be both at the same time. But thought I'd mention that just for some of you that have been following me for a while. And if you're brand new, thanks again for stopping by. And we're going to get started with our painting in just a second. All right, so you can kind of see we have our sketch done. We're excited. We're going to start painting soon, or actually right now. We're going to get some brushes here. I'm going to just check over here next to me. I have a couple different places I keep my brushes. Let's see, what do I have here? Okay, that's good there. Good. All right, so I'm going to have my normal array of brushes that I use for our extreme beginners. So this is, again, an Extreme Beginner Series painting. I'm glad you're here, and if this is your first time coming by and you're just sort of getting started up with this on the Extreme Beginner videos, welcome, and thanks so much for coming by. Thank you for letting me know you're just starting out in the comments section. I always try to say hi, personally in the comments section to everyone, and I'm so happy you're getting started. And always remember, watercolor is like a journey that takes, you just start and you just keep going and you don't worry about it. If it doesn't look good in the beginning, you just keep working through it. Don't ever get discouraged. You just keep going, practicing as you go. And over time, you're just going to keep building up experiences and knowledge in watercolors, and you'll be painting really beautiful paintings. But, it takes, if you put more time into it, your process will go quicker for learning. If you can't afford to spend as much time, which is totally understandable, some of us, I know, all of us here, we have different things going on in our lives, responsibilities, jobs, other things we do. We might give our time to other things that we do in life with community type things and helping others and all the different things that we do in life. We can't always spend as much time as we want to with our artwork, but you just try to do as much as you can, practice as much as you can, and if you get frustrated or you start to run into a little bit of a roadblock, then you just change your course. You say, you know what, for the next 2 or 3 weeks or a month, I'm just going to watch nothing but videos on YouTube about watercolors, or I'm going to purchase a book about watercolors and just read through the book and look at pictures about watercolor. Videos are fun on YouTube. There's millions of videos of watercolor artists on YouTube. So you can always, if you get tired, you watch my videos. I've got hundreds in my archives. You can watch other artists paint too as well. There's tons of great watercolor artists out there on YouTube. So I just encourage you, don't ever get weary. Just keep painting, keep drawing. If you practice your drawing maybe 10, 15 minutes every day, that'll make a huge difference. You just get yourself some sketchbook paper or some printer paper even, and just maybe draw one thing every day. Anything you can, anything you like, whatever your favorite subject matter is. But again, we're using this typical brush setup we have. We have some inexpensive brushes. We have the synthetic variety, which means they're synthetic fibers, and they hold less water, which is kind of good if you're just starting out in watercolor. I've noticed a lot of people have commented how they have too much water on their paper, and their papers are getting flooded out with too much water. So that's, if you're using synthetic brushes, which are more inexpensive, they're actually great when you're first starting out. Once you start working for a while, you probably want to bump up to some natural hair brushes like Kolinsky sable brushes and so forth. But when you're just starting out, these work great. And we just have a variety of them. We have 2. This one comes with the Prang set. So again, I always try to show what I use on YouTube here. I'm using the Prang Oval 16 set. Semi-moist watercolors, Oval 16, Prang makes it. It's by Dixon. And they're great. They last a long time. All you have to do is spritz them with a little bit of water, and they're moist and ready to, you can start painting. And it comes with a brush. This brush here, you'll see it comes with this, so you can just start painting with just this one set, and all you have to do is find some paper, any paper. Eventually you want to start getting watercolor paper, but you could even paint on printer paper if you want to start out with. So let's get started, and what I'm going to do is paint the distant shoreline first. But with this painting we said we're going to do the glazing technique, so let me keep true to my goal and my game plan I had starting out with. This painting will look better with the glazing technique. So what we'll do is I'll get some fresh clean water, so I always put some fresh clean water in my watercolor container, I'll use this larger brush here. This is like this is the 5/8 inch flat brush. And what we're going to do is we're going to moisten the paper just very, very lightly. Just a little bit of water. And it doesn't have to be everywhere. You can just take your brush, dip it in some water, and then just put it onto the paper here and there, not everywhere. And just kind of go across the paper with a little bit of water. Not flooding it, just here and there. That'll give you that beautiful watercolor effect you're looking for. Okay, and that's all you have to do. Maybe at the top you'll do a little more water because that's the sky. Sky is naturally, it's beautiful, it's moist, it's kind of has a lot of that atmospheric moisture to it with clouds and humidity. And then down here in the water too, a little bit of lightly. Now we're going to say what color, and then while that water starts to seep into the paper a little bit, we'll say what colors we're going to use. Let's make this mostly blue. So let's make a nice blue here. And we're going to keep these washes real light. We'll make this more of a Prussian blue, and this is like a French ultramarine blue, and then a Prussian blue. And then we're going to go with a little bit of green. We're going to want a little bit of a green, beautiful, like a viridian green color like that. So mix yourself a variety of blues and greens. And also we're going to want some orange and yellow. Orange, yellow, and a little bit of brown. Brown with a little bit of yellow. Orange, maybe a little bit of red. And I tend to think if you look at your colors and you say, you know, I don't know if that's going to look the greatest, maybe you can lift up a little bit of paint and say, all right, I'm going to stick with more of a brownish gold yellow, like that. That looks a little better. More of an orange color. That looks better, and it's lighter too, which is good. We're going for a really light look for this. The first wash, our glazing technique, remember, is we're going with that first wash is always light, not heavy, dark colors. What I mean by that is you wouldn't want to take like dark brown like that, or dark blue like this, and then, you know, dark green like this. You wouldn't want to put that on this first wash. You want to keep those washes really light like this over here. You can kind of see that, right? So that would be a really dark wash. We'll use those later, more paint. But here we're using less paint, more water for the glazing technique, and we're doing our first wash. So again, I rinse off my brush and I say, all right, let's start out. Let's get our blues going here. And this is where you just sweep the brush across over the paper. Look at that. How easy is that? You pick up a little bit of orange, and you put some of the orange in there too. Leave some white paper for like skies and clouds, cloud shapes, like that. Get a little bit of green in there too. So I'm getting a little green in there too. You can paint right over the bridge, like that. The key is lightly long strokes like this, lightly across the paper that's already pre-dampened with water. Very, very light washes, and then you have it. That's all you need to do. And then you just keep working those colors down into the water. And the same thing is you keep the flow of the water The water flows like this, right? Like when you're on the water, the choppy water, if you're on a boat, it's choppy water. You kind of get that feeling with your brush. That's a good part of watercolor, is sort of trying to mimic, if you can. Not all the time you can do it, but if you can mimic something, like water is a fun thing. You can mimic the feel of water by just swinging your brush like this, nice and easy, like that. And then as you get closer here, you might make your water a little darker. So I'll just pick up a little more color there like that. A little more green. The green looks great there, like that. We're not going to leave a lot of white paper on this painting. This painting is actually going to be more like a cloudy day, maybe. More overcast, where there's some clouds in the sky. So we're not going to see much white paper with like bright white paper. And then you can see that is all you need. That's your first wash. And if you want to kind of add a little more green, if you feel like, if you really enjoy the color green, I like green a lot. So you can add some more green to it, just subtly though, and you can even do it in the sky. Add some more green there. But that's all you need, and now you have to let this dry, and that's really the key now, is once this is done and you've got this once you have that wash down, that really super light wash like this, we have to just let this sit for about a couple hours. Or if you have a hair dryer, you can use a hair dryer to dry this off. It'll look much better if you're going for a finished painting. It's much better to let it dry naturally, a couple hours, or actually that's the way it really looks best, if it just dries naturally the way in the room that you're painting it in. You just kind of leave this sit for, it'll be dry when you come back, and the paper, or the buckling of the paper gets buckled when you put that water on, like we did. Once that paper more flattens out a little bit, and you touch it a little bit here and there, and you can look at it and see that there's no shine to it. So that's basically, if you see kind of like any eggshell type shine to it or glossiness to the paper, it's still wet. Once you see the paper go back to a dull look where there's no shine whatsoever on it, chances are that's good enough that you can start painting back on the paper again. So we just want to keep that in mind, because I've ruined many paintings by going back in too fast. So that's why I always try to mention it at least twice or 3 times to you, because I don't want you to do the same thing. Let this stuff dry. Let that water dry on there, and then you're going to have a great time going back in and doing your second wash over the top, which is going to be the bridge and the distant mountains. We'll do the distant mountains first, and we'll do the bridge last, and you'll see how really great it looks. Okay, and one thing I also mentioned, sometimes you can do a little bit of extra effects to your paintings to get something to look better. You got to try it out and experiment with it and see if it works once in a while. But I sometimes take a tissue or a paper towel and I fold it up like that, so that it's got like a little bit of a point, and then you can go across like this and just make some lines. Maybe sometimes it looks good to just do a couple swipes across the paper. Adds a little different texture maybe to it, but you have to be careful when you do it. Try a little spot first over here, and if it looks good over there like that, then you go with another one across. But that's just another little added variety you can add into your painting that might look, you got to experiment with stuff like this, but it does work. Okay, we'll be right back. We're just going to let this dry. All right, so we're back, and we're actually working our way through the painting. And again, we're just using our Oval 16 by Prang Oval 16 watercolor palette, semi-moist watercolors. These individual pans pop in and out, so you can set them up. I always mention setting up your palette. Warm one side, cool the other, starting from warmest warms to the coolest cools of your palette, going this way and then over here and going that way. So you can kind of see how they're all set in place. Something close to this is going to work good for you. I think you should always have your palette the same way. So once you set it up and you're comfortable with the way it is, keep your palette the same way all the time and just stick with that, because you'll always have an easier time painting, because you'll just memorize where the colors are and eventually you won't even think about it and you'll just go to the colors you need right away. It'll save you time looking for stuff, and because with watercolors we always know, and I always mention this, a little tidbit of information, if this makes sense. Watercolor is kind of a fast medium. You kind of have to work a little bit quickly most of the time. Not always, but so if you can save time by having your colors memorized on your palette, if you have your paints memorized where they are in your palette, it's just a little more savings of time going from your painting to your palette mixing and then coming back over and putting your paint on. So like if you're painting a painting and all of a sudden you can't remember where the color is and you have to stop and think about it for a few minutes and say, oh, what color did I use? And that slows you down a little bit. So that's why I'm always big on always kind of like just telling everybody, like, this is what I did. It really helped me a lot when I changed my habits a little bit with watercolor by learning a few things from some really top-notch watercolor artists. I really noticed it made a big difference. And this is one thing that made a big difference for me, was just staying with the same palette and then having my same colors always in the same place no matter what. I always keep my palette the same way, arrange the same colors, arranged in the same order. And this way, I just eventually get so used to it that I don't have to even think about it. It's like, if we're driving a car, or if we're maybe making something, cooking, or doing something like that, we just do it naturally and we don't really think about it. We just it comes natural. It's like automatic pilot. So that's why I always mention that about my palette. So we can get started here. Let's use this is our Simply Simmons number 6. brush. It's a round brush. I'm gonna my watercolor water looks fine. We only used very little paint, so my water in my water bucket looks fine. It's clean still. And then we're gonna start with our greens. So I'm gonna put this green here, and I'll use the medium green here. It's like a lighter green, kind of like a leaf green or something similar to that. This is more like this green is kind of like a sap green. This over here is our Viridian green. We could use some of that too. I would put it over here. I'll go dark to light. And then maybe some orange and brown and yellow, kind of a yellow ochre kind of color. So here I've mixed my distant shoreline colors. This would be the closer colors up here on the painting, and then as the mountain range in the distance over here, it's a little cooler. So that's where I would go in and just kind of use my blues. Maybe add a little bit of brown in there, and orange, and maybe some red, just to kind of have like a purplish gray color like that. So I'll start in the far distance, and I'm not worrying about the bridge at all right now. We're just doing some distant hills, mountain range. And remember, this is going to dry lighter. Looks a little dark right now, but you'll notice it'll get, and then as it gets closer, I'll add some greens and some of these colors up here. I'll pick some of that up because it's getting closer now. As we're going this way, it's starting to get a little more visible with colors. Maybe in the far distance it looks more grayish and blue. And you just mix up some interesting greens, and then as we get closer over here, and then you can add little bits of color over here now. It's starting to get, so I'll add some oranges and yellows, little dabs of that with this mix too. And some of these mixes up here. Again, everything is pre-mixed for me. I kind of try to mix those colors ahead of time, right? Does that make sense? We mix these ahead of time so we don't have to take all that time to start figuring out what colors. We look at the painting in front of us. We say, okay, I'm looking at a watercolor painting. What color did that artist probably use for that painting? And you just look at your colors and you match them up and you put them down in your palette. And then when it's time to paint, you're not fussing around. You can just go right in and paint and keep that paint process flowing on your canvas or your watercolor paper. And then you're all set. And then again, we're going to do that same process. We get some wash down first, like that. Then you can go in and just take some straight colors and dab in some orange. Orange looks good. It turns into like a yellowish gold color with this. And some yellow too, maybe. And I'm trying to look and see. I usually keep a tissue on hand and I just dab off a little bit of paint, water off the brush. You can even blot up a little bit of paint. And then you can look at how gorgeous that looks. And you can add a little more color, maybe over here, if you want, just to have like that diminishing color effect. By the time it's over here, it's grayish and a little bluer and cooler, right? Because that's the distance, and right. So that's the distance. That makes sense. That's the distance out here. These mountain ranges are far out toward the ocean, miles away from where we're standing right here. Maybe we're in a boat or we're on the shoreline fishing or just sitting in a boat or maybe on a park bench or something and along this waterway. And as we look out into the distance, that's the furthest point, way out there, miles out. It's cool looking, those mountains, and grayish and blue. You could add a little blue or green to it. Maybe some blue and green. But once you get it down, I wouldn't fuss with it too much. So, and that's what we have there in the distance. And these are closest to us. So these are more green. You can see trees and color. It's a little bit of an overcast day. This will lighten up too. This will lighten up over here. The colors, when you put them down, like watercolors, you have to paint a little bit darker than what you think is going to look good because it does dry lighter. So that's a good thing to always keep in mind. Okay, now that we're working on this, we can start. Let's work on the bridge over here because this is all dry. This is starting to dry. Actually, all of this, the distant mountains are starting to dry already. They're pretty dry over here. It's still a little damp over here, but we'll work over here on the bridge because all the rest of the paper is completely dry. Remember, when we came back to start our distant mountains and our mountain range over here, this was 100% dry. This watercolor paper. So once we did that first glazing of all that water, right, then we noticed we let that dry 100%. I used a hair dryer to dry this once we turned the camera off. And when I came back on, this was all 100% dry. And this way we could start painting again where we're not going to have any issues where the paint is going to start flowing out into the paper and into the sky and the water and looking very unpleasant looking. So that's all. So now we have our palette. Let's go back in. We're going to start making our I'm going to say green and brown and blue, Prussian, kind of like that Prussian blue, and the green and the brown. And I think that's going to look good for our bridge. And then we're going to go with even a darker bit still. Let's go with brown and green. We'll make this kind of darker. Brown, green, French ultramarine blue. More brown. We'll make it more of a brownish color. Okay, so these are basically browns, greens, and blues. And this is just the darker version, so I added more straight paint over here. So this is mostly paint, almost zero water. If you can imagine that, that's more thicker. You can see how that's really thick paint. And then, like if we did that, that's very dark. And then if we rinse off our brush and we go over here, rinse our brush off totally, dry it off on a tissue, and then we go over here and we pick up some of this, And you see how that's lighter? So that's what we want. We want the lighter version of the same color. So you just add a little more paint and less water down here to get the darker version, and the lighter version stays just as it is. Okay, so we're going to go in here and start to get our... I'm just going to dry this off so I don't lean into it. And then this is where we kind of said we were going to not fuss too much. And this here is we're not going to try to keep a straight line. We're going to skip some spots too. And as we get very far in the distance, this gets very, very thin, that line, barely visible. And then here we're starting, yeah, that looks good. It started to dry over here too. So this is pretty dry over here. You have to be careful though as you work this way. If this is still damp, I wouldn't go. You can stop short and not paint over here until this dries 100% and then paint over with your bridge structure. But it is getting pretty dry over there, so that looks good. And then we're going to do this over here, more green, I think. Let's do some of this. And we're going to do this here. That looks kind of dark. I'm going to rinse my brush off, maybe add a little more water to that. Maybe it's darker up top there. And then here, we're not going to go fussing too much either. A couple X's in there, like that. Okay. And get some darker darks on there, dry off on the tissue a little bit. A little bit of a shadowing under there. And then there's some cross bracing here. And again, the more haphazard you do this a little bit, like try not to, be free about this. Don't get too fussy with this part of the painting with the bridge here. You want to just kind of get it in. You can only go so fast, I guess. You have to know your techniques and how you feel about how fast or slow you're going to do this. But I guess the thing is not to go too slow. And then I'll add some darker darks here. So there's some of that darker brown mixture in there. A couple spots here and there. And then what else do we have here? We have some more of that lighter tone here. And then over here in the distance, some more of the cross bracing. Again, haphazard. I wouldn't go too much detailed. I would go a little bit darker too in some spots, but not everywhere. Kind of leave this. It's best to kind of leave these long lines like this with breaks in them. Lighter spots, darker, lighter, darker, lighter, kind of across the way. That's just a little bit of information that is kind of works good with this. And again, I dry off the brush a little bit, and then you can get in these really fine lines like this. And these would be the guardrails along the bridge. And then you don't see them too much in the far distance, and then I just dab on some uprights along the guardrails, some posts for those. And then maybe a little few darks here and there on those two as well, to kind of just, there might be a little bit of some details on the tops where these columns are along there. All right, that looks good. Now what I think I'm going to do is, I think this looks good as it is. Yeah, I'm going to say this is finished. This might be, there might be a couple of details here. I think let's try this. I'm going to take some green, some of that. It looks like Viridian green. Take some of that Viridian green and just maybe go across here like so. Maybe make some darker lines here like this. So I think here in the foreground, a little bit of brown, a little bit of Viridian green, a little bit of Prussian blue and French ultramarine blue. So I think if we do this, just a couple little sweeping lines like this of choppiness of water, and then what we can do is splash some water on there too. Maybe some splashes of water, fresh clean water splash on there. And then what we can do is lighten this up over here quite a bit, add some more water to this. And then this way it's even lighter yet. And then like that. And then kind of blend that in like this. So all we're doing is adding some more detail to the painting for the water. Does that look better? I think that looks better. It's got more detail to it now. Before it was a little bit kind of plain for the water. So that's why I did that. I just tried to add a little bit darker, a little bit of some darker darks here, some splashing. Give it a little more of some interesting effects and some spots of color, some interesting things to pique the curiosity of someone that's looking at the painting. Painting sometimes with just almost no detail to it can get really sort of like boring looking. So if we add these little bits of details and things, it'll really make the painting better. And I can even go in with a little more. Even a little more darker there yet. And then I try to keep that line where the tape is pretty even. That'll look better when we peel off the tape. It'll sort of have a more even effect, an even looking wash along the bottom. And I just dry up some of that paint that's flowing on the tape. And if you see an area puddling up, you can take a tissue and just touch down on the paper a little bit to lift up those puddles that might be puddling up at the bottom. You just touch the paper towel or tissue to a puddle or two that are sitting at the bottom of the painting to soak up that puddle of water, and yet it doesn't do anything. It doesn't harm anything to dab up a little bit of a puddle of water, and this way it doesn't make a funny spot on your painting. Okay, perfect. we're having fun. We're having a good time here. This is pretty much the finished painting. We're going to let this dry, and then we'll peel off the tape, and then that's about it. We'll just kind of take one more look. Maybe we're going to actually, we'll call this finished, and then at the beginning of the video, we'll show you the finished painting once we peel off the tape and have more of a, we'll zoom into the painting a little more so you can kind of see closer where the details are and the colors and things like that. So I'll zoom in on this, and that'll be at the beginning. And you can also use that beginning portion of the video to use for your colors. So you can paint from the first 2 or 3 minutes of my video. You can hit pause and paint from that. And you can even draw and paint from the painting because it's not a complex. And I also did the pencil sketch, so you can use that too as well in the beginning of the video. You just hit pause and you can use that. Okay, all right, so we'll sign out for now. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.